There are some huge updates on the anticipated New York Times bombshell article that will cover UFO crash retrievals. As I covered in my previous video on this anticipated New York Times story, Joe Murgia has 6 sources telling him that this story is going to get published. Uri Geller and Nick Pope have chimed in about this story. I have my own anonymous source that told me that knowledgeable people about UFOs have been contacted by New York Times journalists and that the New York Times is also looking into exotic materials that may not stem from the hands of man. And now we have Peabody Award-winning journalist George Knapp explicitly referencing this anticipated bombshell New York Times article on UFO crash retrievals. Here's an Instagram post that dropped about 16 hours ago on Instagram Mystery Wire account. And George Knapp writes, "If you haven't been paying attention, it's time. Big news is coming soon." Now check out the tags he included: New York Times, The Phenomenon, UFOs, Skinwalker Ranch, Lazar, Disclosure. So him tagging the New York Times is a pretty big deal, and he's obviously referencing the anticipated bombshell article that will cover crash retrievals. And then someone underneath him asks, did the New York Times articles finally clear? Is it coming out this week? To which George Knapp responds, just letting them know to keep their antennas up. May want to make some edits. I think what George Knapp is saying when he's expressing essentially to the New York Times that they should keep their antennas up is that George Knapp is pursuing potentially a part of this story that the New York Times has not gotten access to yet. And when he references they may want to make some edits, I think he's saying that we may get some information before you do that you're going to want to include in your upcoming bombshell article. Here is investigative filmmaker Jeremy Corbell's Insta. He's traveling with George Knapp and Matthew Adams to pursue this story. And he writes, UFO ninjas on the prowl. Oh my, what's going to happen? Here's a Twitter post by George Knapp from July 15th where he says, road trip, and you see a sign of Edwards Air Force Base and NASA Neil Armstrong Flight Research Center. And below his tweet is Matthew Adams' tweet, which writes, big news coming from the UAP world soon. It appears that George Knapp is traveling to Edwards Air Force Base. And if you didn't know, Edwards Air Force Base administers Area 51. So there is the possibility that George Knapp is looking for a scoop that involves Bob Lazar and is related to UFO crash retrieval program within the United States. Of course, this is just speculation. Nevertheless, I really look forward to seeing what nuggets of data George Knapp unveils and discovers in this ongoing saga. And before we go, I have 7 words I want to leave you with. I want you to internalize them into the depth of your soul. The house of cards is going to fall, baby.